The crowd's laughter cut through Faith Evans like a knife as she stood frozen in the sweltering heat of the Blackwater Depot on that fateful July afternoon in 1878. Their cruel words barren, worthless, dried up, swirled around her like dust devils on the Texas plain. At 25, being publicly ridiculed for her inability to bear children was the final humiliation in a life that had already taken far too much from her. Faith clutched her worn leather satchel tighter to her chest, its meager contents representing all that remained after her husband's death 6 months prior. The bank had taken their small homestead outside of Austin, leaving her with nothing but a handful of possessions and the painful knowledge that in this unforgiving frontier, a woman without a man or the promise of children was considered less than worthless. Poor Thomas Miller, God rest his soul, cackled Beatrice Whitman, the storekeeper's wife whose tongue was sharper than any blade in her husband's shop. Worked himself to death for a wife who couldn't even give him a son. Faith blinked back tears, refusing to give them the satisfaction. The dusty depot platform beneath her feet seemed to sway as the midday sun beat down mercilessly. She had nowhere to go, no one to turn to. The stagecoach that had brought her to this miserable town had departed, and the train to San Antonio wouldn't arrive until tomorrow. "That's quite enough," came a deep voice, cutting through the jeers like thunder across an open plain. The crowd parted as a tall figure strode forward. The man's face was partially obscured by the brim of a well-worn cowboy hat, but Faith could see a strong jaw shadowed with several days' growth of beard. His piercing blue eyes locked with hers for a moment before turning toward the crowd. "Have you nothing better to do than torment a widow?" he asked, his voice carrying an authority that silenced even Beatrice Whitman. Faith recognized him vaguely as Adam Owens, owner of the Double Circle Ranch that sprawled across the hills north of town. She'd seen him a few times in town before her husband's passing, always from a distance. He was known to be fair but private, a man who kept to himself and his ranch hands, rarely involving himself in town affairs. "This ain't your concern, Owens," grumbled Harold Whitman, stepping forward to defend his wife's gossip. "I'm making it my concern," Adam replied simply. He turned to Faith, his expression softening slightly. "Mrs. Evans, isn't it? I believe we met briefly at last year's Harvest Festival." Faith nodded, surprised he remembered. "Yes, Mr. Owens. You have arrangements for lodging tonight?" he asked, his voice lower now, meant only for her ears. Faith faltered. The truth was she had barely enough money for a train ticket, let alone a room at the town's only hotel. "I'll manage, thank you." Adam's gaze was assessing but not unkind. "My ranch housekeeper, Mrs. Hernandez, has been asking for help with the household duties. It's honest work if you're interested, room and board included." The offer hung in the air between them. Faith was keenly aware of the stares and whispers around them. Pride told her to refuse, to find her own way. Survival told her otherwise. "Why would you help me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. A shadow of something, perhaps pain, crossed his features. "Because everyone deserves better than to be judged for circumstances beyond their control." Faith took a deep breath. The prospect of working as a housekeeper wasn't what she had envisioned for herself, but it was honest work, and right now, she needed a roof over her head more than she needed pride. "I accept your offer, Mr. Owens. Thank you." Adam nodded once, then bent to pick up the small trunk at her feet. "My wagon's this way. We should reach the ranch before sunset." As Faith followed him away from the depot, Beatrice Whitman's voice carried after them. "She'll be just as useless on your ranch, Owens. A barren woman brings nothing but bad luck." Adam didn't slow his stride, but Faith noticed how his shoulders stiffened. "Pay them no mind, Mrs. Evans. Words from small minds don't carry far on the open range." The ride to the Double Circle Ranch was mostly silent. Faith sat perched on the wagon seat beside Adam, watching as the town of Blackwater shrank behind them and gave way to rolling hills dotted with mesquite and oak. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the landscape, painting everything in hues of gold and amber. "It's about 10 miles to the ranch," Adam explained, breaking the silence. "Not too far, but far enough from town to have some peace." Faith nodded, grateful for the distance that would soon separate her from the cruel gossip of Blackwater. "Have you lived here long, Mr. Owens?" "7 years. Came west from Missouri after the war. Started with 50 acres and a dozen cattle." He gestured toward the horizon. "Now the Double Circle covers nearly 2,000 acres. "That's impressive," Faith said sincerely. A small smile touched his lips. "Hard work and good fortune." He glanced at her. "Mrs. Hernandez has been with me since the beginning. She's from Mexico, originally excellent cook, runs the house with military precision. You'll answer to her for household matters." "I understand," Faith replied. "I'm grateful for the opportunity, Mr. Owens." "Adam," he corrected. No need for formalities at the ranch. As they crested a hill, the Double Circle Ranch came into view. Faith couldn't help but gasp softly. A large 2-story house stood proudly on a gentle rise, painted white with a broad porch wrapping around 3 sides. Behind it stretched a complex of barns, corrals, and bunkhouses. Cattle dotted the distant pastures, and a creek wound its way through the property, lined with cottonwoods. "It's beautiful," Faith breathed. "It's home," Adam replied simply, but she caught the note of pride in his voice. As they approached the main house, a plump woman with silver-streaked black hair emerged onto the porch, wiping her hands on her apron. She watched their approach with curious eyes. "Sophia," Adam called as he brought the wagon to a stop. "This is Mrs. Faith Evans. She'll be helping you with the household duties, as we discussed." Sophia Hernandez studied Faith with sharp, intelligent eyes before her face broke into a warm smile. "Welcome to Double Circle, Mrs. Evans. It will be good to have another woman around this place. These cowboys, they create more mess than a herd of buffalo." Faith returned the smile, instantly warming to the older woman's forthright manner. "Thank you, Mrs. Hernandez. I'm very grateful for the position." "Sophia, please," the housekeeper insisted. "Come inside. You must be tired and hungry after your journey." As Adam carried her trunk onto the porch, Faith felt a strange sense of relief wash over her. For the first time since Thomas's death, she didn't feel completely adrift. It might be temporary, it might be humble work, but it was a chance, and right now, that was more than she'd had this morning. "Get settled in," Adam said, setting down her trunk. "Sophia will show you around. We eat dinner at 6. He tipped his hat slightly and headed back toward the barns. Sophia led Faith into a spacious, well-appointed home that spoke of comfort rather than ostentation. The furniture was solid and practical, the floors covered with hand-woven rugs. Through a doorway, Faith glimpsed a study lined with bookshelves. "He reads a great deal," Sophia remarked, following Faith's gaze. "More than most men I've known." She led Faith up a staircase to the 2nd floor. "You'll have this room here. It gets the morning sun, very pleasant." The bedroom was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a chest of drawers, and a small table by the window that overlooked the eastern pastures. After months of uncertainty, the simple room felt like luxury to Faith. "Thank you," she said, running her hand over the quilt that covered the bed. "It's lovely." Sophia studied her thoughtfully. "You've had a difficult time, yes," Faith nodded, unsure how much Adam had told his housekeeper. "Those town people, they can be cruel," Sophia continued, her accent becoming more pronounced with emotion. "But here, we judge by work and character, not by foolish gossip." She patted Faith's arm. "Rest now. Wash up when you're ready. Bathroom is at the end of the hall, dinner in 1 hour." After Sophia left, Faith sank onto the edge of the bed, finally allowing the tears she'd been holding back all day to fall. They weren't entirely tears of sadness. There was relief there too, and perhaps a tiny flicker of hope. Tomorrow would bring hard work, but it would also bring a new beginning, something she'd stopped believing was possible. She opened her trunk and carefully removed her few possessions. Among them was a small Degria type of Thomas, taken just after their wedding 5 years ago. He looked so young, so full of hope and plans. They both had been. "I'm trying, Thomas," she whispered to the image. "I'm trying to find my way." Closing the trunk, Faith went to the washstand and began preparing for dinner, determined to face whatever this new chapter might bring with as much grace and strength as she could muster. Dinner at the Double Circle Ranch was a revelation to Faith. After months of eating alone in her small cabin, and then whatever meager fare she could afford at boarding houses during her journey, the abundance at Adam's table was almost overwhelming. Sophia had prepared a feast of roast beef, potatoes, fresh baked bread, and garden vegetables, all served in the spacious dining room. Adam sat at the head of the table, with Faith and Sophia seated on either side. 2 ranch hands introduced as Patrick and Eduardo joined them as well, bringing stories from the day's work along with healthy appetites. "We brought in that stray herd from the north pasture," Patrick reported between bites. "That young bull's going to be a fine breeder come next season." Adam nodded approvingly. "Good. We'll need to strengthen the bloodline if we're expanding the herd next year." Faith ate quietly, observing the easy camaraderie between Adam and his men. There was respect there, but also a comfortable familiarity that spoke of years working together. It was so different from the formal, often tense meals she'd shared with Thomas's family on the rare occasions they'd visited. "Mrs. Evans," Adam said, turning his attention to her. "Sophia tells me you're from Austin originally." Faith nodded, setting down her fork. "Yes, though I grew up in St. Louis. My family moved to Texas when I was 16, just after the war." "And your husband was a farmer?" Adam asked. "Yes," Faith replied. "We had 40 acres outside Austin. Thomas grew mostly cotton with some corn and vegetables for ourselves." She didn't mention how the land had never quite yielded what they'd hoped, how each year had been a struggle against drought, pests, and falling cotton prices. "You know about growing things, then?" Sophia interjected with interest. "Good. The kitchen garden needs attention." "These men know cattle and horses, but vegetables? Hopeless." This drew chuckles from Patrick and Eduardo and even a slight smile from Adam. "I'd be happy to help with the garden," Faith offered. "I always enjoyed that part of farm life." "Sophia will show you your duties tomorrow," Adam said. "For tonight, just rest and get your bearings." After dinner, while Sophia supervised the cleanup, Adam invited Faith to join him on the front porch. The evening was cool after the heat of the day, with a gentle breeze carrying the scent of sage and prairie grass. They sat in rocking chairs, watching as the last light faded from the western sky and stars began to appear overhead. "It's so quiet here," Faith observed, breaking the comfortable silence. "One of the things I value most," Adam replied. "In the war, there was never silence. Even in camp at night, there were always sounds, men coughing, crying out in their sleep, sentries walking their posts." He paused. "After that, I promised myself if I survived, I'd find a place where silence was possible." Faith glanced at him, realizing he'd just shared something deeply personal. "You fought for the Union," Adam nodded. "Missouri Volunteers, enlisted in '62, fought until Appomattox." His expression grew distant. "Came home to find my parents' farm sold for taxes and my younger brother dead of fever." "I'm sorry," Faith said softly. He shrugged slightly. "War took from everyone one way or another." He turned to her. "What brought you to Blackwater, Mrs. Evans? If you don't mind my asking." Faith sighed, considering how much to share. After Thomas died, I couldn't keep up the farm payments. The bank foreclosed. I was headed to San Antonio. My cousin lives there with her husband. I thought perhaps I could find work as a seamstress or shop assistant. She gave a small, self-deprecating smile. I hadn't planned on stopping in Blackwater at all, but the stagecoach needed repairs. And then, well, you saw what happened. Those people had no right to treat you that way, Adam said, his voice hardening. What happened between you and your husband was no one's business but your own. Faith looked down at her hands. People look for someone to blame when things don't go as expected. We'd been married 5 years with no children. In their eyes, that made me defective. People see what they want to see, Adam replied. Rarely the truth. They fell silent again, each lost in their own thoughts as the night deepened around them. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called, its lonely cry echoing across the hills. I should turn in, Faith said finally, rising from her chair. Thank you again, Mr. Owens Adam, for your kindness today. Not many would have done what you did. Adam stood as well, his tall frame silhouetted against the starlit sky. Anyone with decency would have done the same, Mrs. Evans. Faith, she corrected with a small smile. If I'm to call you Adam, then you must call me Faith. He nodded, returning her smile. Good night then, Faith. Sleep well. As Faith made her way up to her new room, she felt an unfamiliar sensation in her chest, something like peace, or perhaps the beginning of healing. Whatever tomorrow might bring, for tonight at least, she had found a safe harbor in the storm of her life. The first rays of sunlight were just breaking over the eastern horizon when Faith awoke the next morning. For a moment, she lay disoriented, the unfamiliar room confusing her sleep-addled mind. Then the events of the previous day rushed back, and she remembered she was at the Double Circle Ranch, starting a new chapter of her life. She dressed quickly in one of her 2 serviceable work dresses, pinned her honey-brown hair into a simple bun, and made her way downstairs. The delicious aroma of coffee and frying bacon guided her to the kitchen, where Sophia was already hard at work. Ah, you are an early riser. Good. Sophia nodded approvingly. Many hands make light work, as they say. The men have been up since before dawn. They will be hungry when they come in. Faith rolled up her sleeves and immediately set to helping, falling into the comfortable rhythm of kitchen work. She'd always enjoyed cooking, finding satisfaction in creating nourishing meals from simple ingredients. Sophia proved to be an excellent teacher, showing Faith where everything was kept and explaining the routine of the ranch household. The men eat breakfast at 6, dinner at noon, supper at 6, Sophia explained. Adam takes his meals with them usually, except when he has business matters to attend to. Between meals, we clean, wash, mend, and tend the garden. Once a week, we bake enough bread for the whole ranch. By the time the ranch hands began filing into the dining room, Faith and Sophia had prepared a hearty breakfast of bacon, eggs, biscuits, and gravy. Faith found herself enjoying the chorus of appreciation from the hungry men, 7 in total, including Adam. Mrs. Evans, Adam greeted her as she refilled the coffee pot. I trust you slept well. Very well, thank you, Faith replied, noticing how the morning light accentuated the blue of his eyes. And please remember it's Faith. After breakfast, while the men headed out to their various tasks, Sophia took Faith on a proper tour of the house and grounds. The main house was larger than it had appeared at first glance, with 4 bedrooms upstairs, a study, dining room, parlor, and kitchen downstairs, plus a root cellar and storage rooms. Behind the house stood a substantial kitchen garden, currently somewhat overgrown. As you can see, the garden needs attention, Sophia said, gesturing to the rows of vegetables fighting against encroaching weeds. I do my best, but these old knees do not bend as they once did. I'll start on it today, Faith offered, already mentally planning how to restore order to the neglected plots. By midday, Faith had made significant progress in the garden, weeding 2 entire beds of tomatoes and beans. Her back ached and her hands were dirty, but she felt a sense of accomplishment she hadn't experienced in months. When Sophia called her in to help with dinner preparations, Faith washed up at the outdoor pump, the cool water refreshing against her sun-warmed skin. The noon meal was simpler than the previous night's dinner: bean soup, cornbread, and cold ham, but the men ate with the same enthusiasm. Faith noticed Adam watching her as she helped serve, his expression thoughtful. After the meal, as Faith and Sophia were cleaning up, Adam appeared in the kitchen doorway. "Faith, I wondered if you might join me for a moment," he said. "There's something I'd like to show you." Curious, Faith wiped her hands on her apron and followed Adam through the house and out onto the front porch. A beautiful chestnut mare stood tethered to the hitching post, saddled and ready. "This is Penny," Adam explained, stroking the horse's neck. "She's gentle but spirited. I thought you might like to ride her while you're here. The ranch is too large to explore on foot." Faith approached the mare cautiously, extending her hand. Penny sniffed her fingers, then nudged her palm gently. "She's lovely," Faith said, "but I'm not sure I should. Can you ride?" Adam interrupted. "Yes, I grew up riding, but then you should ride here," Adam said simply. "All my ranch hands have access to horses. You're part of the ranch now, even if temporarily." Faith felt a lump form in her throat at the unexpected kindness. "Thank you," she managed. "I'd love to ride her." "Good." Adam seemed pleased. "Perhaps Sunday, if the weather holds, I could show you some of the more distant parts of the property. There's a waterfall on the north boundary that's worth seeing." Before Faith could respond, one of the ranch hands called for Adam from the corral, where it appeared a horse was giving them trouble. "Duty calls," Adam said with a slight smile. "Penny's yours whenever you have time to ride." With that, he strode off toward the corral, leaving Faith standing beside the beautiful mare. A warm feeling spreading through her chest that had nothing to do with the midday sun. Days at the Double Circle Ranch quickly fell into a pleasant routine for Faith. She rose early to help Sophia with breakfast, spent mornings working in the now thriving kitchen garden, assisted with the midday meal, and then devoted afternoons to various household tasks: mending, cleaning, or preserving the garden's bounty. By the end of her first week, she felt more at home than she had in years. Sophia proved to be not just an employer but a friend, sharing stories of her life in Mexico before crossing the border as a young woman, and teaching Faith to make traditional dishes like chili con carne and tamales. The older woman never pried into Faith's past or asked about her marriage, but offered a sympathetic ear whenever Faith felt like talking. "He was a good man, Thomas," Faith told Sophia one evening as they shelled peas on the back porch. "Hardworking, honest, but farming broke him, bit by bit. Each failed crop, each debt that couldn't be paid, it wore him down." Sophia nodded understandingly. "The land gives and takes away. Some men can bear it, others cannot." "He wanted children so badly," Faith continued, her voice growing softer. "Each month that passed without a baby was another disappointment. After a few years, he stopped talking about it, but I could see it in his eyes." "And you? Did you want children too?" Sophia asked gently. Faith's hands stilled their work. "More than anything. I used to dream about a house full of children, little ones running through the fields." She blinked back tears. "The doctor in Austin said there was nothing physically wrong with either of us. Sometimes it just doesn't happen," he said. Sophia reached across to pat Faith's hand. "Life rarely follows the path we imagine for ourselves, but sometimes the unexpected path leads to greater happiness." Faith wasn't sure she believed that yet, but she appreciated Sophia's wisdom nonetheless. Adam remained something of a mystery to Faith. He was unfailingly polite and considerate, ensuring she had everything she needed, but he kept a certain distance. Often, he would be gone before dawn, returning only for the evening meal, retreating to his study afterward. Yet Faith frequently caught him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. Sunday finally arrived, bringing with it the promised ride around the property. Faith woke with a flutter of anticipation in her stomach. She donned her best riding skirt, one of the few nice garments she'd kept after selling most of her belongings, and pinned her hair more carefully than usual. Adam was waiting on the porch when she emerged, 2 horses saddled and ready. He wore clean denims and a blue shirt that matched his eyes, his usual Stetson shadowing his face. "Good morning," he greeted her. "I hope you're up for a long ride. The north boundary is about 5 miles from here." "I'm looking forward to it," Faith replied truthfully. After a week confined mostly to the house and garden, the prospect of open spaces was enticing. They set off at an easy pace, Adam pointing out features of the ranch as they rode the best grazing areas, where the water ran year-round, the stand of pecan trees that produced abundantly in good years. Faith found herself genuinely interested, asking questions that revealed her knowledge of land management gleaned from years of farm life. "You understand more about ranching than most city women would," Adam observed. Faith laughed softly. "Hardly a city woman. I've had dirt under my nails most of my life." "It suits you," Adam said simply. As they rode farther from the ranch house, the landscape grew more dramatic. Rolling hills gave way to rockier terrain, with stands of oak and mesquite providing welcome shade. Birds called from the trees, and once a family of deer bounded across their path before disappearing into the brush. "It's beautiful," Faith breathed, taking in the wild, untamed landscape. "This is my favorite part of the ranch," Adam admitted, "least touched by human hands." They dismounted at a small creek to let the horses drink and rest. Adam spread a blanket in the shade of a large oak tree and produced a bundle from his saddlebag that turned out to contain bread, cheese, and apples, a simple picnic prepared by Sophia. As they ate, Faith found herself studying Adam when he wasn't looking. The sun had bronzed his skin, and fine lines around his eyes spoke of years squinting into the distance. There was a quiet strength about him that she found increasingly compelling. "Tell me about your life before the double circle," Faith said, curiosity getting the better of her. Adam took a bite of apple, considering her question. "Not much to tell that you haven't heard. Grew up in Missouri, fought in the war, came west afterward." "But why Texas?" Faith pressed. "Why ranching?" A shadow crossed his face. "After the war, I couldn't go back to farming, too many memories. My father and I worked that Missouri soil together since I was old enough to walk." He paused. "And after what I'd seen and done in the war, I needed open spaces, room to breathe." Faith nodded, understanding the need for a fresh start all too well. "I worked cattle drives for 3 years," Adam continued, "saved every penny. When I had enough, I bought 50 acres and a small herd, built the ranch up bit by bit." "Alone?" Faith asked. "Sophia came along in the 2nd year. Found her in San Antonio, cooking in a hotel. Her husband had died and she was looking for a change." A small smile touched his lips. "Best decision I ever made, hiring her. She's the heart of Double Circle." "She's remarkable," Faith agreed. "I've learned so much from her already." "And what about you?" Adam asked, turning the conversation. "What would you be doing now if circumstances had been different?" Faith looked out across the rolling landscape, considering the question. "I'm not sure anymore. For so long, my dreams were tied to Thomas and the farm. When those disappeared," she shrugged slightly. "I suppose I'm still figuring out what comes next." "You could stay here," Adam said, his voice carefully neutral. "The position isn't temporary unless you want it to be. Sophia isn't getting any younger and the ranch is growing. We need good people." Faith's heart skipped a beat at the offer. "That's very generous." It's practical, Adam countered, but the warmth in his eyes suggested something more. You work hard, you get along with everyone, and the garden hasn't looked this good in years. Before Faith could respond, a distant rumble of thunder caught their attention. Looking west, they saw dark clouds gathering on the horizon. Storm's coming, Adam said, quickly packing up their picnic. We should head back. Texas storms can move fast. They mounted up and turned the horses toward home, picking up the pace as the wind began to freshen. The air grew heavy with the scent of rain, and Faith could feel the electricity building in the atmosphere. They were still a mile from the ranch house when the storm overtook them. Rain began to fall in heavy sheets, driven by gusting wind. Lightning split the sky, followed by crashes of thunder that spooked the horses. There's a line shack just ahead, Adam called over the storm, pointing to a small structure barely visible through the downpour. We can wait it out there. They urged their nervous mounts forward, reaching the small cabin just as hail began to mix with the rain. Adam quickly unsaddled the horses and led them into a lean-to attached to the shack, while Faith pushed open the door to the cabin itself. It was a simple one-room structure with a small fireplace, a narrow cot, a rough-hewn table, and 2 chairs. The ranching equivalent of a way station, Faith realized somewhere for the hands to take shelter when working distant parts of the property. Adam joined her moments later, rain dripping from his hat and coat. The horses are settled, he reported, removing his wet outer garments and hanging them by the door. The storm looks like it might last a while. Faith nodded, suddenly very aware of their isolation and proximity. They were alone, miles from the ranch house in a space no larger than her bedroom. Adam seemed to realize it at the same moment, a slight tension entering his posture. I'll get a fire started, he said, moving to the fireplace where kindling and wood were stacked neatly. Faith wrung water from her skirts as best she could and moved to help, gathering the smallest twigs for starting the fire. Their hands brushed as they worked, sending an unexpected warmth through Faith's body despite her damp clothing. Soon a cheerful fire was blazing, pushing back the chill and casting a golden glow around the small space. Faith sat on one of the chairs, extending her hands toward the warmth. Your dress is soaked through, Adam observed with concern. There should be some dry clothes in that trunk. The hands keep spare things here. Faith hesitated, but the discomfort of her sodden clothing won out. She moved to the wooden trunk in the corner and found several shirts and a pair of trousers that looked as though they might fit well enough to preserve her modesty. I'll step outside while you change, Adam offered. In this storm. Don't be ridiculous, Faith replied practically. Just turn your back, I'll be quick. Adam obliged, facing the fire as Faith hastily changed out of her wet dress and into the dry clothing. The shirt was much too large, and she had to roll up the sleeves several times, but the trousers fit reasonably well once she cinched them with a piece of rope she found in the trunk. You can turn around now, she said, spreading her dress near the fire to dry. Adam's eyes widened slightly when he saw her in the men's clothing, but he made no comment beyond asking if she was warmer now. Much, thank you, Faith replied, returning to her seat. Outside, the storm continued to rage, rain lashing against the small windows and wind howling around the eaves. Inside, the fire crackled cheerfully, creating a cocoon of warmth and light that felt somehow separate from the rest of the world. Looks like we might be here a while, Adam observed, settling into the other chair. Sophia will worry if we're not back by dark. She'll guess we took shelter, Faith assured him. She seems to know everything that happens on this ranch before it happens. Adam chuckled. That's true enough. A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the sounds of the storm and the fire. Faith found herself studying Adam's profile as he gazed into the flames, noticing the strong line of his jaw, the slight cleft in his chin, the way his eyelashes cast shadows on his cheeks in the firelight. "Why did you really help me that day at the depot?" Faith asked suddenly, the question that had been lingering in her mind for a week finally finding voice. Adam looked up, surprised by the direct query. "I told you I couldn't stand by and watch them treat you that way." "But why?" Faith persisted. "You didn't know me. I was nothing to you." Adam was quiet for a long moment, seeming to consider his words carefully. "I recognized something in you," he finally said. "A kind of dignity in the face of cruelty that reminded me of my mother. After my father died, people said unkind things that she'd worked him to death, that she'd squandered his legacy." His expression hardened at the memory. None of it was true, but gossip doesn't care about truth. Faith nodded, understanding. "I'm sorry she had to endure that." "So am I," Adam replied. "But she taught me that the best response to meanness is kindness, not weakness kindness. There's a difference." He looked directly at Faith. "When I saw you standing there, facing down those vultures with your head high, I knew you were the same kind of person. Strong in the ways that matter." Faith felt a blush rise to her cheeks at the unexpected praise. "I don't feel very strong most days." "Strength isn't about feeling strong," Adam said quietly. "It's about continuing on when you don't." Their eyes met and held across the small space between them. Something unspoken passed between them, recognition, perhaps, of kindred spirits who had weathered different storms but understood the same truths. Outside, the thunder gradually receded, and the drumming of rain on the roof lessened. Inside, something new and fragile began to take root in the soil of shared understanding. The storm passed eventually, but by then the day was fading toward evening. They rode back to the ranch house under clearing skies, arriving just as the first stars began to appear. Sophia met them at the door, her relief evident. "Thanks be to God," she exclaimed. "I was beginning to worry." "We waited out the storm in the North Line shack," Adam explained, helping Faith dismount. "We're fine, just a bit damp." Sophia ushered Faith inside with instructions to change into dry clothes and come down for the supper she'd kept warm. Adam went to see to the horses, promising to join them shortly. Later that night, after the meal was over and the house had quieted, Faith sat alone on the front porch, wrapped in a shawl against the cool night air. The storm had left everything smelling fresh and clean, and the sky above was a tapestry of stars, brilliant against the velvety darkness. She heard the front door open and close softly, and then Adam was there, settling into the chair beside hers. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. Faith shook her head. "Too much on my mind, I suppose." They sat in companionable silence for a while, listening to the night sounds, crickets chirping, an occasional owl hooting, the distant lowing of cattle. "I've been thinking about your offer," Faith said eventually, "to stay on at the ranch." Adam turned to look at her, his expression unreadable in the darkness. "And? I'd like to accept if the offer still stands." "It does," Adam confirmed, and Faith thought she detected a note of pleasure in his voice. "Thank you," Faith said simply. "It feels right being here." Adam nodded, seeming to understand what she meant. "The ranch has a way of claiming people. It claimed me from the first moment I saw this valley." "It's more than the land," Faith admitted softly. "It's the people. Sophia, the hands, you." The last word came out barely above a whisper. Adam was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice had a careful quality to it. "Faith, I don't want you to feel obligated in any way. Your position here is secure regardless of anything else." Faith turned to face him fully. "I don't feel obligated, I feel seen." For the first time in a very long while, the air between them seemed to thicken with unspoken possibility. Adam reached out slowly, as if giving her time to pull away, and covered her hand with his own. "I see you, Faith Evans," he said quietly, "and what I see is remarkable." Faith's heart fluttered in her chest. It had been so long since anyone had looked at her with anything like admiration, let alone the warmth she now saw in Adam's eyes. Part of her wanted to pull away, to protect the fragile new sense of independence she was building. But a stronger part wanted to lean into this connection that felt so unexpected and yet so right. Before she could decide which impulse to follow, Adam gently squeezed her hand and then released it. "It's getting late," he said, rising from his chair. "Good night, Faith." "Good night, Adam," she replied, watching as he disappeared back into the house, leaving her with a curious mixture of disappointment and anticipation swirling in her chest. Summer gave way to autumn on the Double Circle Ranch, bringing cooler temperatures and spectacular sunsets that painted the sky in shades of orange, pink, and purple. Faith flourished in her role, expanding beyond basic household duties to help with the ranch accounts. She had a good head for figures, and even assisting with the fall roundup, preparing meals for the hands working long days in the saddle. Her friendship with Sophia deepened into something like family, the older woman becoming the mother figure Faith had lost years before, and her relationship with Adam. That was evolving too, in ways both subtle and profound. There were shared glances across the dinner table, conversations that stretched late into the evening on the front porch, rides together on Sunday afternoons that took them to every corner of the ranch. Adam began teaching Faith about cattle breeding and ranch management, sharing his plans for expanding the herd and improving the bloodlines. "You have a good eye for stock," he told her one day as they inspected a group of new calves. "You can see the potential in them." Faith found herself blushing at the compliment. "I'm just learning from you." Adam shook his head. "No, it's a natural ability. You see things as they could be, not just as they are." It was true, Faith realized. Since coming to the Double Circle, she had begun to see possibilities everywhere in the garden, in the ranch, in herself. The crushing weight of failure and loss that had defined her last years with Thomas was gradually lifting, replaced by a sense of purpose and belonging. October brought the first frost, silvering the pastures in the early morning light. Faith rose before dawn, wrapping herself in a shawl to gather the last of the garden's peppers before the cold could claim them. The kitchen was warm and fragrant with the scent of coffee when she entered, arms full of red and green peppers. "You're up early," Adam observed, looking up from a ledger spread open on the table. "So are you," Faith countered with a smile, setting her harvest on the counter. "Ranch accounts keeping you awake." Adam closed the book with a sigh. "Cattle prices are down in Kansas City. I'm considering holding some of the herd over winter instead of shipping them all north." Faith put the coffee pot on the stove. "You mentioned that new strain of winter wheat you've been experimenting with in the South pasture. If it yields well, you could feed more cattle through the winter for less." Adam looked at her with surprise and admiration. "That's exactly what I was calculating." He shook his head slightly. "You know, most women would find this conversation terribly dull. Most women haven't spent years listening to discussions about crop yields and market prices," Faith replied lightly, bringing him a cup of coffee. "Besides, I find it interesting. The ranch is a living thing, always changing, always needing care and attention." Adam's expression softened as he accepted the cup from her. "You understand it in a way few people do." Their fingers brushed during the exchange, and neither pulled away immediately. These small moments of contact had been occurring more frequently, a hand at her elbow as they walked, shoulders touching as they sat side by side reviewing the ranch books, fingers meeting over a past plate at dinner. Each touch sent a ripple of awareness through Faith, a reminder of feelings she'd thought long dormant. "Faith," Adam began, his voice taking on a more serious tone, "there's something I've been wanting to discuss with you." Faith's heart quickened as she took the seat opposite him. "Yes." Before Adam could continue, the back door opened, and Sophia entered, already talking about the day's plans. The moment was broken, and whatever Adam had been about to say remained unspoken. Throughout the day, Faith found herself wondering what Adam had wanted to discuss. His manner had seemed earnest, almost nervous, unusual for a man normally so self-assured. She found herself hoping, with a mixture of excitement and trepidation, that perhaps he wanted to change the nature of their relationship. In quiet moments, Faith had begun to acknowledge to herself that her feelings for Adam had grown beyond friendship or gratitude. She admired his integrity, his quiet strength, his kindness that never veered into softness. She enjoyed his company more than anyone she had ever known. And yes, she found herself physically drawn to him in ways that sometimes left her sleepless at night, remembering the touch of his hand or the sound of his laughter. But such thoughts brought complications. Faith was still technically a widow in mourning, though her grief for Thomas had transformed into a gentle remembrance rather than an acute pain. And then, there was the matter of her perceived barrenness, the very thing that had made her an object of mockery in Blackwater. Would Adam want a wife who might never give him children to inherit the ranch he had built? These questions circled in Faith's mind as she went about her duties, so distracted that Sophia finally asked if she was feeling unwell. "I'm fine," Faith assured her. "Just thinking." Sophia gave her a knowing look. About the boss, perhaps? Faith felt heat rise to her face. "Is it that obvious?" Sophia's expression softened. "Only to someone with eyes to see. You look at him the way I once looked at my Carlos." She patted Faith's hand. "And he looks at you the same way." "Does he?" Faith couldn't keep the hopeful note from her voice. "Men are sometimes slower to recognize their own hearts," Sophia said wisely. "But yes, he does." The conversation with Sophia gave Faith courage. That evening, after dinner, when Adam mentioned needing to check on a mare about to foal, Faith offered to accompany him to the stables. The night was clear and cold, their breath forming small clouds in the air as they walked across the yard. Stars glittered overhead like diamonds scattered across black velvet, and a nearly full moon silvered the landscape. The stable was warm and dim, filled with the comforting sounds and smells of horses. Adam led the way to a stall where a beautiful bay mare lay on a bed of fresh straw, her sides heaving slightly. "This is Bella's first foal," Adam explained, keeping his voice low and soothing as he checked on the horse. "She's doing well, but I like to keep an eye on the first-timers." Faith leaned against the stall door, watching as Adam gently examined the mare. His hands were strong but infinitely gentle, his movements confident and reassuring. The mare seemed to trust him completely, barely shifting as he worked. "You're good with her," Faith observed. "She knows you won't let anything happen to her or her foal." Adam straightened up, a small smile playing at his lips. "Animals know who they can trust. They're better judges of character than most people." "What do you think she sees in you?" Faith asked, genuinely curious. Adam considered the question seriously. "Consistency, maybe. I try to be the same person every day, reliable, fair." He stroked the mare's neck. "Animals appreciate knowing where they stand." "People do too," Faith said softly. Adam's eyes met hers over the mare's back. "Faith, about this morning what I wanted to tell you," a commotion from outside interrupted them, the sound of hooves and men's voices. Adam frowned, moving quickly to the stable door with Faith close behind. One of the ranch hands, Eduardo, was dismounting from a lathered horse. "Boss," he called, seeing Adam emerge from the stable. "Riders coming, looks like trouble." "How many?" Adam asked sharply. "5, maybe 6, armed. They're moving slow, but they're heading straight for the house." Adam's expression hardened. "Get inside, Faith," he instructed. "Tell Sophia to bolt the doors and stay away from the windows." "What about you?" Faith asked, suddenly afraid. "I'll handle this," Adam replied, his voice leaving no room for argument. "Go now, please." Faith hurried to the house, delivering Adam's message to Sophia, who immediately began securing the doors and windows. From the front parlor, Faith could see lanterns approaching along the main road to the ranch 6 riders, just as Eduardo had reported. "Who do you think they are?" Faith asked Sophia, who had joined her at the window despite instructions to stay away. "Nothing good comes riding after dark," the older woman replied grimly. "Bandits, maybe, or that gang from the south that's been troubling ranches near the border." Faith's stomach knotted with fear not for herself, but for Adam, who had positioned himself between the approaching riders and the house, flanked by Eduardo and 2 other ranch hands. All 4 men held rifles. The riders pulled up about 50 yards from the house. In the moonlight, Faith could make out rough-looking men, unshaven and trail-worn. The leader, a burly man with a bushy beard, called out, "That you, Owens? Been a while." Adam's stance remained rigid. "State your business, Jackson. You're not welcome here." The man named Jackson laughed, an ugly sound that carried clearly through the night air. "That any way to greet an old friend, especially one who rode with you from Sedalia to Abilene back in '70. We were never friends," Adam replied coldly. "And that was a long time ago." "Well now, that hurts my feelings," Jackson mocked, "especially since I've come all this way to offer you a business proposition." "I'm not interested in any proposition you might have." Jackson's voice hardened. "You might want to hear me out before you decide. Me and the boys have a herd prime beef cattle, about 300 head. Need a place to graze them for a while until things cool down up Amarillo way." "Stolen cattle," Adam stated flatly. "The answer is no. Now ride out or I'll have my men escort you off my land." Jackson's laugh came again, colder this time. 4 against 6 ain't good odds, Owens, and that's some mighty valuable grazing land you're sitting on. Be a shame if something happened to it or to that fine house of yours." The threat hung in the air like gunsmoke. Faith's hands clenched into fists at her sides, fear warring with anger at this man who dared threaten the ranch, her home now as much as Adam's. "Last warning, Jackson," Adam's voice carried clearly. "Ride out now." For a tense moment, it seemed the confrontation might erupt into violence. Then Jackson raised his hands in a gesture of mock surrender. All right. No need to get trigger happy. We'll go." He turned his horse, then looked back over his shoulder. "But you might want to post extra guards on those north pasture cattle, Owens. Never know what might happen to unprotected stock these days." With that parting threat, the riders wheeled their horses and galloped away, leaving a cloud of dust in the moonlight. Faith watched until they disappeared from sight, then hurried outside to where Adam and the hands were conferring in low, urgent tones. "Double the night patrols," Adam was instructing. 2 men together at all times, and send word to the neighboring ranches to be on alert." "Who were those men?" Faith asked, approaching the group. Adam turned, his expression grim. "Cattle thieves. Jackson used to work the drives years ago before turning to rustling." He ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of agitation. "I should have expected this. There have been reports of rustling activity to the north." "Will they come back?" Faith asked. "Probably," Adam admitted. "Men like Jackson don't take no for an answer easily." He turned to the hands. "Get some rest. I'll take first watch myself." The men nodded and dispersed to their various duties. Faith stood beside Adam in the yard, feeling the tension radiating from him. "You should go inside," he said quietly. "It's not safe out here." "If it's not safe for me, it's not safe for you either," Faith replied stubbornly. "What can I do to help?" Adam looked down at her, his expression softening slightly. "You already are helping just by being here." He hesitated, then added, "Faith, if anything happens, if there's trouble, promise me you'll put your safety first. The ranch can be rebuilt, cattle replaced." "But you," he broke off, seeming unable to find the right words. Faith felt her heart swell with emotion. Impulsively, she reached up and touched his cheek, her fingers light against his skin. "Nothing is going to happen," she assured him, "but I promise to be careful if you promise the same." Adam covered her hand with his own, holding it against his face for a moment. "I promise," he said softly. For a brief moment, the threat of Jackson and his men receded, and there was only the two of them, standing close in the moonlight. Then Adam gently lowered her hand, though he didn't release it. "There's so much I want to say to you," he began, "but now isn't the time. Once this situation is resolved." Faith nodded understanding. "I'll be here," she promised. The next 3 days passed in a state of heightened vigilance on the double circle. The hands rode regular patrols, always in pairs, watching for any sign of Jackson's gang. Adam barely slept, dividing his time between riding the boundaries and coordinating with neighboring ranchers to establish a mutual defense network. Faith threw herself into keeping the ranch running smoothly in Adam's absence, overseeing meals, ensuring the hands had what they needed, and continuing to manage the household accounts. At night, she often waited up for Adam's return, having coffee and food ready no matter the hour. On the fourth night, Faith was sitting at the kitchen table, ledger open before her but her mind elsewhere, when the back door opened and Adam entered. He looked exhausted, dust coating his clothes and a day's growth of beard shadowing his jaw. "Any sign of them?" Faith asked, rising to pour him coffee. Adam shook his head, sinking into a chair. "Nothing, which makes me more uneasy, not less. Jackson isn't the type to make empty threats." Faith set the coffee before him and began preparing a plate of cold roast beef and bread. Perhaps the sheriff's warning scared them off. The day before, Adam had ridden into Blackwater to alert the sheriff about Jackson's gang. Perhaps, Adam conceded, though he didn't sound convinced. He took a long sip of coffee, then looked up at Faith with a tired smile. "Thank you for keeping everything running so smoothly. I don't know what I'd do without you." The simple admission warmed Faith more than any elaborate declaration could have. "You'd manage," she said lightly, "but I'm glad you don't have to." Adam's expression grew more serious. "Faith, when this is over, there's something important I need to ask you." Faith's heart skipped a beat. "You could ask me now," she suggested softly. Adam shook his head. "No, it deserves better timing than this, with me half dead from exhaustion and worry." Before Faith could press further, a gunshot shattered the night's silence, followed immediately by shouting from the direction of the barns. Adam was on his feet in an instant, grabbing his rifle from where it leaned against the wall. "Stay inside," he ordered Faith, already moving toward the door. But Faith couldn't bring herself to simply hide while the ranch her home was under attack. Grabbing a shotgun that hung above the kitchen door, she followed Adam outside. The scene in the yard was chaos. 2 of the barns were already ablaze, flames leaping high into the night sky. Horses screamed in terror as ranch hands rushed to free them from the burning structures. And through the smoke and fire, riders moved like shadows, firing at anything that moved. Faith spotted Eduardo and another hand taking cover behind a water trough, returning fire at the attackers. Adam was sprinting toward them, keeping low. Without hesitation, Faith ran toward the nearest barn, where she could hear the panicked neighing of horses still trapped inside. The heat was intense as she reached the barn door. Smoke billowed out, making it difficult to see or breathe. Pulling her shawl over her nose and mouth, Faith plunged inside, feeling her way along the stalls. She managed to free 3 horses, slapping their flanks to drive them toward the door and safety. As she reached the last stall, a burning beam crashed down behind her, blocking her exit. The horse inside Penny, Faith realized with a jolt, was rearing in terror, eyes rolling wildly. "Easy, girl," Faith called, trying to keep her voice calm despite her racing heart. "Easy now." Penny was too frightened to be easily led. Faith knew she had only moments before the entire structure would collapse. Making a split-second decision, she climbed into the stall and onto Penny's back, gripping the mare's mane tightly. Then, using her heels and voice, she urged the horse forward toward the far end of the barn where a window offered the only escape. Penny needed little encouragement. With a powerful surge, she leaped forward, crashing through the window in a shower of glass and splintered wood. They landed hard in the yard, Faith clinging desperately to the horse's back as Penny bolted away from the burning barn. Faith managed to slow and turn the frightened mare, bringing her to a halt near the well. As she slid from Penny's back, she realized the gunfire had stopped. Looking around frantically, she tried to make sense of the scene through the smoke and confusion. Several figures were being herded toward the house at gunpoint Jackson, and his men, Faith realized, now captives. Adam stood among the ranch hands, issuing orders for containing the fires and securing the prisoners. Relief flooded through Faith at the sight of him unharmed. Then, without warning, one of the captives, Jackson himself, broke free, drawing a hidden pistol from his boot. He aimed directly at Adam's back. "Adam!" Faith screamed, raising her shotgun instinctively. Adam turned at her cry, seeing the threat too late to react. Faith pulled the trigger just as Jackson fired. The shotgun's blast caught Jackson squarely in the chest, throwing him backward onto the ground. But Jackson's bullet had found a target as well. Adam staggered, clutching his shoulder, before sinking to his knees in the dirt. Faith dropped the shotgun and ran to him, heart in her throat. "Adam! Oh God, Adam!" Blood was seeping through his fingers where he gripped his shoulder. His face was pale with shock and pain, but his eyes found hers. "Faith," he managed, "you're all right." "I'm fine," she assured him, tears streaming down her smoke-grimed face. "But you're hurt. We need to get you inside." With the help of Eduardo and another hand, Faith got Adam into the house and onto his bed. Sophia appeared with bandages and a basin of hot water, her expression grim but determined. "Bullet went clean through," she reported after examining the wound. "Bad, but not fatal if we prevent infection." Faith stayed by Adam's side as Sophia cleaned and bandaged the wound, holding his hand and murmuring words of comfort and encouragement. His face was drawn with pain, but he never cried out, only squeezed her hand when the pain was worst. By dawn, the immediate crisis had passed. The fires were extinguished, the surviving members of Jackson's gang locked in the tack room under guard until the sheriff could collect them, and Adam was resting as comfortably as could be expected, though fever had begun to set in. Faith refused to leave his bedside, bathing his face with cool water when the fever rose and helping him sip broth when he was conscious enough to take it. Sophia brought her food that went largely untouched and tried to persuade her to rest, but Faith remained steadfast. "You need sleep," Sophia admonished gently on the second day. "You will be no help to him if you collapse." "I can't leave him," Faith replied, her voice hoarse with exhaustion and worry. "What if he needs me?" Sophia's expression softened. "You love him very much, don't you?" Faith looked down at Adam's pale face, relaxed now in sleep. "More than I thought possible," she admitted quietly. "I can't lose him, Sophia, not now, not when we've only just found each other." "He is strong," Sophia assured her, "and he has much to live for." She touched Faith's shoulder gently. "I will sit with him for a while. Rest, even if just for an hour. For his sake, if not your own." Reluctantly, Faith agreed, retreating to her own room where she fell into an exhausted sleep still fully dressed. When she woke, the light had changed. She had slept far longer than the promised hour. Alarmed, she hurried back to Adam's room. To her immense relief, she found him awake, propped up slightly against the pillows. His face was still pale and drawn, but his eyes were clear of the fever glaze that had frightened her so. "There you are," he said, his voice weak but warm. Sophia wouldn't tell me where you'd gone. Faith moved quickly to his bedside, taking his hand between both of hers. I was resting on Sophia's orders. How are you feeling? Like I've been trampled by a bull, Adam admitted with the ghost of a smile. But better than yesterday. Sophia says the fever's breaking. Faith blinked back tears of relief. You scared me half to death. I'm hard to kill, Adam assured her, his fingers tightening around hers, especially with you standing guard. Sophia says the sheriff came and took Jackson's men away, Faith told him. The ranch hands have everything under control. Patrick and Eduardo are overseeing repairs to the barns. Adam nodded slightly. Good men, all of them. He paused, studying her face. Sophia told me what you did going into the burning barn, saving Penny. His expression grew more serious. And saving my life. That was either the bravest or the most foolish thing I've ever witnessed. I couldn't let him shoot you, Faith said simply. You could have been killed, Adam pointed out, a note of anguish entering his voice. So could you, Faith countered, and I couldn't bear that. Not without telling you. She faltered, suddenly uncertain. Adam raised his free hand, touching her cheek gently. Telling me what? Faith took a deep breath, gathering her courage. That I love you. That somewhere between that first day at the depot and now you became everything to me. Adam's face transformed, pain giving way to a joy that took Faith's breath away. Faith Evans, he said softly, I have been trying to find the right moment to tell you the same thing for weeks. I love you, your strength, your kindness, your determination. I love the way you see the world, the way you've made this ranch more of a home than it ever was before. Tears spilled down Faith's cheeks, but they were tears of happiness now. Even knowing I might never give you children, she asked, the old fear surfacing despite her joy. Adam's expression grew tender. Faith, listen to me. Children would be a blessing, yes. But you are the blessing I never expected, never thought to deserve. If it's just the two of us until the end of our days, that would be more than enough for me. Faith leaned forward, pressing her forehead gently to his. I love you, Adam Owens. I think perhaps I began to love you that very first day when you stood up for me when no one else would. Then it seems I've been waiting a long time to do this, Adam murmured, tilting his face up to capture her lips with his. The kiss was gentle, mindful of his weakened state, but filled with promise and tenderness that made Faith's heart soar. When they finally parted, both were smiling despite the tears in their eyes. Marry me, Adam said, still holding her close. As soon as I can stand up long enough to say the vows, be my wife, my partner in everything. Yes, Faith replied without hesitation. Yes to all of it. Adam's recovery was slow but steady. By the end of 2 weeks, he was able to move around the house, though Sophia and Faith both scolded him when he tried to do too much too soon. The ranch continued to function smoothly thanks to the loyal hands and Faith's increasing competence in management matters. Word of the attack spread throughout the region, along with the news that it was Faith who had saved Adam's life. The story transformed her reputation in Blackwater overnight. The same people who had mocked her as barren and worthless now spoke of her courage and devotion with admiration. Faith cared little for their changed opinions. Her world had narrowed to the ranch and the man she loved, and the future they were building together. They were married 3 weeks after the attack, in a simple ceremony on the front porch of the ranch house. Sophia wept openly, and even the toughest of the ranch hands grew misty-eyed as Faith and Adam exchanged vows before the circuit riding preacher. I promise to stand beside you always, Faith vowed, her voice clear and strong, in good times and bad, in plenty and in want. I promise to be your partner in all things, to love and honor you all the days of my life. I promise to cherish and protect you, Adam replied, his eyes never leaving hers, to respect your strength and support your dreams. I promise that no matter what the future brings, my heart is yours completely forever. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, the cheer that went up from the assembled ranch hands and neighbors echoed across the valley. Sophia presented them with a feast that would be talked about for years to come, and there was dancing on the front lawn until well after dark. That night, as Faith and Adam stood on the porch of what was now truly their home, watching the last of their guests depart, Adam wrapped his arms around his wife from behind, pulling her back against his chest. "Happy Mrs. Owens," he murmured against her hair. Faith leaned into his embrace, watching the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. "Happier than I ever dreamed possible," she replied truthfully. "Good," Adam said, turning her in his arms to face him, "because this is just the beginning." As winter settled over the Double Circle Ranch, Faith and Adam settled into married life with a joy that seemed to warm even the coldest days. Their love deepened and grew stronger with each passing week, built on a foundation of mutual respect, shared values, and genuine affection that manifested in countless ways, both large and small. Adam consulted Faith on all ranch decisions now, valuing her practical insight and careful judgment. Faith continued to manage the household and garden, but also took on more responsibility for the ranch accounts and correspondence. Together, they created a partnership that made the Double Circle more prosperous than ever before. Their physical relationship blossomed as well. Adam proved to be a tender and considerate lover, attuned to Faith's needs and desires. Night after night, they discovered new dimensions of intimacy and pleasure in each other's arms, their passion tempered by deep emotional connection that made each encounter more meaningful than the last. They never spoke directly about children, but neither did they take precautions against conception. Faith tried not to hope too fervently, knowing how such hope had led to bitter disappointment in her first marriage. Adam, true to his word, never gave any indication that he felt their life together was lacking in any way. Christmas came and went, celebrated with a warmth and festivity that Faith had never experienced before. Adam surprised her with a beautiful pearl necklace that had belonged to his mother, and Faith presented him with a hand-knitted sweater she had worked on secretly for weeks. The entire ranch gathered for a feast in the dining room, with gifts for everyone and carols sung around the piano that Adam had ordered from San Antonio as a gift to the household. January brought unusually heavy snow, keeping everyone close to home. Faith used the enforced isolation to organize the ranch records into a more efficient system and to begin planning expansions to the kitchen garden for spring. Adam spent hours in his study, corresponding with cattle buyers in the north and drafting plans for improving the ranch's water management. It was during one of these quiet January evenings, as they sat before the fire in the parlor, that Faith first suspected something might be different. A wave of nausea had washed over her suddenly, forcing her to set aside her sewing and take several deep breaths. Adam noticed immediately. "Faith, are you all right?" "Just a momentary dizziness," she assured him, not wanting to worry him over what was likely nothing. "It's past now." But the episode repeated itself the next morning and again 2 days later. Faith began to wonder, to hope, but said nothing, not wanting to raise expectations that might come to nothing. She had experienced such symptoms before in her marriage to Thomas, only to be disappointed when her monthly courses arrived with predictable regularity. It was Sophia who finally confronted her, cornering Faith in the pantry one morning after she had excused herself hastily from breakfast. "You are with child," the housekeeper stated matter-of-factly, her eyes sharp with concern and excitement. Faith shook her head, though her hand went instinctively to her stomach. "I can't be sure. I've been disappointed before." Sophia's expression softened. "I have seen many women in this condition, Faith. The sickness in the morning, the tenderness I notice when you wince at certain movements, the glow in your skin despite the winter pallor most of us have. She took Faith's hands in hers. When was your last monthly time? Faith calculated quickly, realizing with a jolt that she was indeed late, very late. Before Christmas, she whispered, hope and fear warring in her chest. Almost 2 months then, Sophia nodded. You should tell him. Faith bit her lip. What if I'm wrong? What if it's just wishful thinking? Then you will face that together, Sophia said firmly. But I do not think I am wrong about this. That evening, after dinner, Faith asked Adam to join her for a walk despite the cold. Bundled in heavy coats, they strolled arm in arm under a sky brilliant with stars, their breath forming small clouds in the freezing air. Is something on your mind? Adam asked eventually. You've been quiet today. Faith stopped walking, turning to face him in the moonlight that transformed the snowy landscape into a sea of diamonds. Adam, I have something to tell you, but I'm afraid to hope too much. Adam's expression grew concerned. What is it, love? Faith took a deep breath. I think Sophia thinks that I might be expecting a child. For a moment, Adam stood perfectly still, his face unreadable in the silvery light. Then, with a joy that seemed to burst from his very soul, he swept Faith into his arms, lifting her off her feet and spinning her in a circle that left them both breathless and laughing. A baby, he breathed when he finally set her down, his hands cradling her face as if she were made of the most precious porcelain. Our baby, Faith nodded, tears of happiness freezing on her cheeks in the cold air. I can't be absolutely certain yet, but all the signs are there. Faith, Adam said, his voice thick with emotion. Even if it turns out not to be so this time, the fact that it's possible, that we might someday, it's more than I ever dared to hope for. You truly mean that, don't you? Faith marveled, searching his face in the moonlight. With all my heart, Adam assured her. I married you for you, Faith Evans Owens. Just you. Anything else is a blessing beyond measure. They held each other close in the silent, snowy night, hearts beating as one, filled with a cautious joy that neither had expected to find in this life. As winter gradually yielded to spring, Faith's condition became increasingly certain. The morning sickness subsided, replaced by a healthy appetite and a new fullness to her figure that Adam found endlessly fascinating. By March, there was no hiding the gentle swell of her belly, and the news spread throughout the ranch and eventually to Blackwater. The reaction from town was swift and somewhat comical to Faith, who had long since stopped caring about the opinions of people who had once mocked her so cruelly. Suddenly, the very women who had called her barren and worthless were appearing at the ranch with gifts and advice, eager to be associated with the now prosperous and respected Mrs. Owens. Faith received them with grace, but maintained a polite distance, recognizing their overtures for the shallow gestures they were. Her true friends were at the ranch Sophia, who fussed over her like a mother hen, Eduardo's wife Maria, who shared practical advice from her experience with 5 children, and of course, Adam, whose protective instincts had intensified to occasionally amusing degrees. I can still lift a bucket of water, Adam, Faith laughed one April morning when he insisted on carrying a pail she had filled at the well. I'm with child, not made of glass. Humor me, Adam replied, taking the bucket from her hands with a smile that still made her heart skip a beat. I've waited a long time to have someone to fuss over. As Faith's pregnancy progressed, so did plans for the ranch's future. Adam and Faith spent long evenings discussing expansions, improvements, and the legacy they hoped to build for their child. They decided to add a nursery to the main house, converting a storage room adjacent to their bedroom into a bright, cheerful space for the baby. Adam threw himself into the project with characteristic thoroughness. Ordering the finest wood for a cradle, he insisted on building himself, and commissioning a rocking chair from a craftsman in San Antonio. Faith sewed curtains and bedding, and Sophia contributed a beautiful handmade quilt stitched from scraps of colorful Mexican fabric. By June, Faith's belly was prominent, and the baby's movements had become strong enough for Adam to feel when he placed his hand on her stomach. The first time it happened, as they lay together in their bed one warm evening, Adam's expression of wonder and love brought tears to Faith's eyes. "That's our child," he whispered, his voice full of awe. "Our child, Faith." The summer of 1879 was unusually hot, making Faith's last months of pregnancy uncomfortable. Adam insisted she rest during the hottest part of the day, and Sophia prepared cool drinks and light meals that would tempt Faith's flagging appetite. Despite the discomfort, Faith had never been happier. The ranch was thriving, her marriage was a daily joy, and the child growing within her represented a future she had once thought forever denied to her. August arrived with no relief from the heat. Faith's time was drawing near, and Adam arranged for the doctor from Blackwater to stay at a neighboring ranch so he could be summoned quickly when needed. Faith found herself both eager for and apprehensive about the birth, excitement mingling with the natural fears of a first-time mother. "Were you afraid? With your children?" Faith asked Maria one afternoon as they sat shelling peas on the back porch. Maria smiled, her dark eyes warm with memory. "With each one, yes, but the fear passes and then there is only joy." "And pain," Faith added wryly, shifting uncomfortably on her chair. Her back had been aching persistently all day. "The pain is forgotten the moment they place your child in your arms," Maria assured her. "You will see." Faith nodded, wincing as another twinge of pain shot through her lower back. This one was stronger than before, making her gasp slightly. Maria looked at her sharply. "How long have you been having these pains?" "Since this morning," Faith admitted, "but they weren't very strong until now." Maria set aside the bowl of peas, her expression becoming serious. "I think perhaps your time has come, Faith. We should get you inside and send for the doctor." Events moved quickly after that. Faith was settled in her bedroom, where Sophia and Maria prepared everything needed for the birth. Adam was dispatched to fetch the doctor, riding out at a gallop with a face pale with concern and excitement. The pains increased in frequency and intensity as the afternoon wore on. Faith paced the room when she could, breathing through the contractions as Maria instructed. Sophia kept cool cloths ready for her forehead and offered sips of water between pains. Adam returned with the doctor just as evening was falling. Dr. Harrison, a kindly man in his 50s who had attended hundreds of births, examined Faith with professional efficiency. "Everything is progressing normally," he assured both Faith and Adam. "The baby is in the correct position. Now we wait." Adam refused to leave Faith's side despite the doctor's suggestion that the birthing room was no place for a husband. He sat beside the bed, holding Faith's hand through each contraction, wiping her brow and murmuring words of encouragement and love. As midnight approached, the pains became overwhelming. Faith gripped Adam's hand with each contraction, trying not to cry out but sometimes unable to contain her groans. Through it all, Adam remained steadfast, his face reflecting her pain but never wavering in his support. "You can do this," he told her again and again. "You're the strongest woman I've ever known, Faith Owens. Our child is almost here." Finally, as the first hints of dawn began to lighten the eastern sky, Dr. Harrison announced that it was time to push. Faith gathered her remaining strength, focusing on Adam's voice and the thought of holding their child. "One more push," the doctor encouraged after what seemed like hours. "The head is crowning. One more good push, Mrs. Owens." With a final, monumental effort, Faith bore down. There was a moment of searing pain, then a curious emptiness, followed immediately by the most beautiful sound she had ever heard, the lusty cry of a newborn baby. A girl, Dr. Harrison announced, holding up the tiny, wriggling form for them to see. A perfect little girl. Adam made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. A daughter, he breathed, his voice filled with wonder. We have a daughter, Faith. After the baby was cleaned and wrapped in a soft blanket, the doctor placed her in Faith's arms. Looking down at the tiny face with its rosebud mouth and button nose, Faith felt a love so profound it seemed to redefine her very existence. "Hello, little one," she whispered, counting perfect fingers and toes with a mother's instinctive need to verify that all was well. "We've been waiting so long for you." Adam sat on the edge of the bed, one arm around Faith's shoulders, the other hand gently stroking his daughter's downy head. "She's beautiful," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Like her mother. What shall we call her?" Faith asked, looking up at Adam with tired but radiant eyes. Adam considered for a moment, then smiled. "Hope," he suggested. "Because that's what she represents, the hope we never gave up on, even when it seemed impossible." "Hope Sophia Owens," Faith agreed, thinking of the woman who had become like a mother to her, who had believed in this miracle even before Faith herself had dared to. Dr. Harrison, who had been quietly attending to the afterbirth and ensuring Faith was not bleeding excessively, straightened up with a satisfied nod. "Mother and daughter are doing excellently," he announced. "Mrs. Owens, you should rest now. Your body has been through a tremendous ordeal." But Faith was reluctant to close her eyes, unable to stop gazing at the miracle in her arms. It was only when Adam gently took the baby, promising to keep her close, that Faith finally surrendered to exhaustion. When she woke hours later, the room was filled with golden afternoon light. Adam was sitting in a chair by the window, Hope cradled in his arms. He was speaking to her in a low voice, telling her about the ranch and all the adventures they would have together. The sight brought fresh tears to Faith's eyes, tears of joy and gratitude for the life she had found against all odds. News of Hope's birth spread quickly through the county. The ranch hands celebrated with an impromptu feast, and visitors began arriving from neighboring ranches and even from Blackwater, bearing gifts and good wishes. Faith received them from her bed for the first few days, then insisted on moving to the parlor, unwilling to play the invalid any longer than necessary. Among the visitors was Beatrice Whitman, the woman whose cruel words at the depot had once cut Faith so deeply. Now she arrived with a hand-knitted baby blanket and an awkward attempt at an apology. "I was wrong about you, Mrs. Owens," she said stiffly, unable to quite meet Faith's eyes. "I hope you can forgive my unkind words." Faith, with Hope nursing contentedly at her breast, looked at the woman with neither anger nor triumph, but simple compassion. "There's nothing to forgive, Mrs. Whitman. The past is behind us." As Beatrice left, Adam came to sit beside Faith on the sofa, his arm slipping naturally around her shoulders. "That was generous of you," he observed. "More than she deserved." Faith leaned against him, watching their daughter's peaceful face as she nursed. "Holding on to bitterness would only diminish this happiness," she replied, "and I refuse to let anything do that." Adam pressed a kiss to her temple. "You continue to amaze me, Faith Owens." "As you do me," Faith replied softly. "I never imagined finding such love, such joy." Adam's gaze moved from Faith to their daughter and back again, his eyes full of the future they would build together. "This is only the beginning," he promised. "Only the beginning." Epilogue: 5 years later, the Double Circle Ranch was transformed in the soft golden light of late afternoon. Lanterns hung from the branches of the oak trees that shaded the front lawn. Tables were laden with food and drink, and a small band played cheerful tunes from a makeshift platform near the barn. People from miles around had gathered to celebrate the ranch's 10th anniversary and the recent birth of Adam and Faith's third child. Faith stood on the front porch, watching the festivities with a contented smile. 5-year-old Hope was dancing with her father, standing on his boots as he guided her through the steps, her laughter carrying across the yard. 3-year-old Thomas was being entertained by Sophia, who at 70 showed no signs of slowing down. Especially when it came to doting on the children she considered her grandchildren in all but blood. In Faith's arms, 6-week-old Rebecca slept peacefully, untroubled by the noise and activity around her. Faith gazed down at her youngest child, marveling as she always did at the miracle of new life. Each of her children had been welcomed with the same joy and wonder, each representing another chapter in the story that had begun that day at Blackwater Depot. The ranch had prospered beyond their wildest expectations. Under Adam and Faith's joint management, the Double Circle had expanded to over 5,000 acres, with one of the finest herds of cattle in the state. They had built a school for the children of their ranch hands and neighboring homesteads, with a proper teacher brought in from Austin. The main house had been expanded to accommodate their growing family, and a new bunkhouse constructed for the increasing number of hands required to work the larger operation. Through it all, Adam and Faith's partnership had only strengthened. They worked together, raised their children together, and continued to find joy in each other's company. Their love had deepened with each passing year, tempered by the occasional disagreements and challenges that faced any couple, but always returning to the foundation of respect and admiration that had been there from the beginning. Adam spotted Faith watching from the porch and whispered something to Hope before making his way through the crowd to join his wife. At 38, he was still as handsome as the day Faith had first seen him, though with touches of silver at his temples now, and a few more lines around his eyes, lines Faith knew came as much from laughter as from worry. "How are my girls?" he asked, climbing the porch steps to stand beside Faith. He peered down at Rebecca's sleeping face with the same wonder he had shown with each of their children. "Perfect," Faith replied, leaning into him as he slipped an arm around her waist. "Both of us." Adam pressed a kiss to Faith's temple, then to Rebecca's forehead. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice thoughtful. "A dangerous pastime," Faith teased. Adam chuckled. "Perhaps, but I was thinking about that day at the depot. How close I came to not stopping, to riding on past and never knowing you." Faith sobered, considering how different her life would have been. "I've thought about that too. How a single moment, a single choice can change everything. I thank God every day that I made the right choice," Adam said softly. "That I found the courage to stand up to those people, to offer you a place here. And I thank God I had the courage to accept," Faith replied, "to trust a stranger when trust didn't come easily." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching their daughter dance with Sophia now, while Thomas had found a playmate in one of the ranch hand's sons. The setting sun painted everything in hues of gold and amber, a perfect Texas evening. "You ever regret it?" Adam asked suddenly. "Staying here instead of going on to San Antonio. You could have had a different life, maybe an easier one." Faith turned to face him fully, shifting Rebecca to one arm so she could touch Adam's cheek with her free hand. "Not for a single moment," she said firmly. "This is where I belong. With you, with our children, with this land we've built together." Adam caught her hand and pressed a kiss to her palm. "I love you, Faith Owens, more today than yesterday, and not as much as I will tomorrow." "And I love you," Faith replied, her heart as full as it had ever been. "For giving me a home when I had none, for believing in possibilities when others saw only limitations, and for helping me prove them all wrong in the most beautiful way possible." As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and purple, Adam leaned down to kiss his wife properly, a kiss full of history and promise, of memories made and still to come. Around them, the celebration continued, but for a moment, There was only the two of them and the miracle they had created together. A family, a home, a life richer than either had dared to dream. To beginnings that never end, Adam murmured against her lips. And endings that are just new beginnings, Faith agreed, as Rebecca stirred in her arms and hope called for them to come dance. Hand in hand, they descended the porch steps to join their children. Moving forward together into the future, they continued to build, day by day, with love as their foundation and faith as their guide.